On the 12th of November, 1886, the Wyoming high plains are misleadingly still, a sea of golden dry grass, poised for either a fire or a hard frost. The wind doesn't merely blow here, it scrapes and abrades. It seeks out gaps in the caulking of log homes and freezes water in wash basins before dawn devotions. In Granite Creek, the typical late autumn noise is the steady thud of axes sinking into pine. Men scramble to beat the certain fall of the thermometer. Each household understands the calculation. Extra firewood equals survival. When snowdrifts reach the roofline, a cord of oak becomes more precious than gold. Yet on the outskirts, on a rocky plot no one else claimed, a different noise emerges. The sound of a shovel grating against compacted dirt. Martha, a widow for 3 years whose hands are tougher than leather, isn't cutting firewood, she's excavating a pit. Passersby and the tobacco-chewing men on the general store's boardwalk perceive only a woman. She resembles a woman who has also lost her mind, not just her spouse. She stands up to her waist in a 1-2 foot by 8 foot rectangular trench, flinging soil behind her with a robotic, unflagging tempo. The local busybody, Cyrus, a fellow known for his booming voice and limited imagination, rests against a hitching post. He observes her silhouette moving up and down against the darkening sky. Is she digging her own grave? Cyrus chuckles. The grating noise in the thin atmosphere feels a bit too loud even for a woman her size. Perhaps she intends to enter her mule alongside her. The men nearby laugh along, but their laughter is uneasy. They worry about their own supplies of firewood and the inadequate thickness of their walls. Ridicule serves as a cozy cover when you're secretly dreading the chill. They stare at Martha because her actions break the basic tenet of frontier life. For survival, you construct upward and sturdy. You dominate the terrain, not tunnel into it like a rodent. But Martha pays them no attention. She disregards the wind ripping at her bonnet and the grit lining her throat. Her attention is fixed on a precise dimension, a figure she holds in her mind as if in prayer. 4 feet deep, then 5, then 6. What the townsfolk fail to grasp is that Martha's excavation is more than just a hole. She is tapping into a concealed aspect of the Earth's physics that everyone else has overlooked. Whereas Granite Creek's air temperature fluctuates dramatically, scorching in July and fatally frigid in January, the ground beneath the frost depth acts as a stable reservoir. 6 feet down, the soil maintains a consistent temperature of about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, no matter how fierce the blizzard overhead. This principle is called thermal inertia. Martha is not constructing a house that resists the cold. Instead, she is creating a dwelling that the cold can never locate. But to Cyrus and the rest, she appears merely as a desperate woman shifting soil. As the sky becomes a shade like a bruised plum, heralding the season's first hard freeze, the ridicule mounts as her construction takes form, violating all conventional building standards of the time. The typical cabins in this territory are basic rectangles. 4 walls, a sloped roof, a front door facing the street. Symmetry is the norm. Martha's construction is boldly unbalanced, a sharp gash across the terrain. She erects the northward wall from the ground itself, employing the same sod she removed, piling it deep and tall, roughly 4 feet above the surface. A defensive berm is constructed an artificial hill, intended to redirect the dominant winter winds above her dwelling. It prevents them from hitting directly. On a Tuesday, Thomas, a younger man who runs the livery stable and harbors a more subdued curiosity than Cyrus, rides to her property. He observes her struggling to maneuver a heavy beam into position on the tall northern wall. "Ma'am," he shouts, getting off his horse to assist lifting the beam. He remarks that he notices she's creating a slope. The roof pitch is severe, making it difficult for shingles to stay in place. He studies the unique angle. The roof descends sharply from the elevated northern berm to an extremely low southern wall, which stands just a foot above the ground. Martha responds, wiping dirt off her face. "Thomas, it's not for shingles." Her tone is calm, lacking the insanity the townspeople ascribe to her. It's calculated a 4-5-degree angle. She gestures toward the southern horizon, where the winter sun at that moment starts its slow, shallow path across the sky. During December, the sun remains low. This slope captures the sunlight. If the roof were flat, the light would reflect away. If constructed like a typical cabin, only shadow would be gathered. Thomas alternates his gaze between the structure and the sun, performing mental calculations while rubbing his chin. For the first time, he realizes this is not a home, but a mechanism, a solar energy collector. However, comprehending the slope is one matter. Embracing the materials is quite another. Later that week, Martha undertakes an action that nearly provokes an uproar of laughter in the saloon. Instead of using her limited funds on cast iron stoves or wool blankets, she purchases broken window panes and old frames from an abandoned hotel in the neighboring county. She transports a wagon filled with assorted glass panes, fragile and glistening, back to her excavated site. To the locals, this is self-destructive. Glass opposes heat retention and allows warmth to leak out. They see her constructing a glass castle in the dirt. Cyrus laughs loudly, hitting the counter. He predicts that a single hailstorm or heavy snowfall will leave her freezing in a greenhouse full of broken glass. They fail to grasp the thermal logic. They don't realize that although glass permits heat loss at night, it allows shortwave solar radiation to enter in the daytime, provided there is a method to store that energy. Martha doesn't simply invite sunlight. She has a strategy to capture it. The building process exposes the most essential element. This is the most misconstrued part of her survival design. While neighbors seal log walls with moss and mud to block drafts, Martha lines her dugout interior with stones, not wood. These rocks feel warm to the touch but are actually cold, hard river stones. For days, she transports wagonfuls of smooth, dark basalt from the creek, painstakingly stacking them against the back north-facing earthen wall. To the townsfolk, this appears as insanity heaped upon stupidity. Sarah, a neighbor, murmurs to Thomas while they observe from afar. Stone draws all warmth away from a room. She says it will be like residing in a grave, damp, cold, and uncomfortable. Sarah questions why she doesn't use cedar, which is abundant. Her reasoning follows conventional wisdom. Wood acts as an insulator, hindering heat flow. Wooden walls don't feel cold to the touch, whereas stone in winter feels bitingly cold. Martha's focus isn't on insulating that back wall. Instead, she's after thermal mass. The town overlooks this key concept. While insulation retains heat, thermal mass actually stores it. Wood possesses minimal thermal mass, it warms and cools rapidly. Stone, especially dense dark basalt, functions as a thermal battery. Energy absorption is slow, but once achieved, it's retained and released gradually over hours. Martha is essentially constructing a delay timer powered by the sun. Sunlight will pass through her glass roof, strike the dark stone wall at the back of the dugout, and be absorbed when the sun sets and the air temperature plunges to 20 below zero. Come evening, that stone wall continues to emit the heat it absorbed at midday. Meanwhile, she prepares a mortar from clay and ash, carefully sealing the stones and also the floor. She lays darker stones as paving, ensuring no soil is visible. By early December, what has been dubbed the widow's folly resembles a crude bunker. Her roof consists of assorted glass panes, sealed using tar and pine pitch. The rear is embedded in the ground, making the structure squat, inconspicuous, and unsightly next to the upright cabins. Yet when the initial snowflakes start to fall, a hush settles on her property. No chimney smoke is visible because she hasn't yet built one. For Cyrus, the absence of smoke serves as ultimate evidence. He declares she must be frozen. Without a fire, there is no sign of life. But if you're someone who values the subtle workings of survival, who examines a challenge and spots a solution that others overlook, then you should consider clicking that subscribe button now. Soon we'll witness precisely how this misunderstood contraption functions when the true trial comes. Because although the townspeople trust their wood stoves, the barometer is falling. Mid-December commands attention. The sky loses its depth, turning flat and iron gray. The wind changes direction, sweeping directly down from the Canadian Shield. With a sharp bite, it instantly freezes the moisture in a person's nose. This serves as the prelude to what veterans refer to as a blue norther, a front that advances with incredible speed. Temperatures can plummet by 40 degrees within an hour. Meanwhile, the town square buzzes with frantic activity. Men split wood by lantern light, their breath rising like steam from locomotives. The stack of firewood near the schoolhouse is shrinking, and Cyrus is outside issuing commands. He inspects the window seals, nailing thick canvas over the frames for an added shield. He combats the cold using barriers, striving to keep the adversary at bay. At the dugout, Martha is taking a completely different approach. Instead of boarding up her windows, she is cleaning them. She cleans every bit of the glass roof using a vinegar and water solution, guaranteeing optimal clarity. After that, she goes inside. She has positioned two 50-gallon whiskey barrels full of water exactly where the sunlight strikes the floor. Water serves as an even more effective thermal battery than stone, capable of storing huge quantities of energy before its temperature shifts. Just before the storm arrives, Thomas makes one final pass on horseback. The wind is already roaring, whipping up dust and snow into blinding spirals. Spotting Martha by the low door as she examines the latch, he shouts above the wind, "A storm is on its way, Martha. Do you have sufficient firewood?" Draped in a thick shawl, she glances his way and shakes her head. "I've got plenty, my boy," she calls back. Thomas departs on his horse, shaking his head with concern. He cares for her, yet dreads that he'll have to excavate her from a frozen grave by spring. Unbeknownst to him, inside her unusual underground dwelling, the wall thermometer shows 65 degrees. Without even a fire kindled, the trial is already underway. The tempest descends upon Granite Creek not merely as a weather event, but as a tangible attack. Starting 2 hours past sunset, a shrieking white barrier obliterates the horizon within moments. The mercury drops at an alarming rate, a rapid freezing event scientists call a flash freeze. At the saloon, each time the thermometer near the entrance is glanced at, the mercury visibly sinks. 30, then 20, reaching 0 by midnight. The temperature falls to 25 below, and with the wind chill, exposed flesh feels close to 60 below zero. The noise is overwhelming, a continuous thunder that rattles the thick wooden skeletons of the town's most robust structures. Within the cabins, the concept of thermal bridging transforms into a crucial lesson in physics, with life or death stakes. The metal nails that fasten the siding transmit the cold directly through the timber. By 3 in the morning, the exposed nail tips inside are covered with frost, resembling spectral eyes peering from the walls. Cyrus, who once mocked the widow's venture the most harshly, has stopped chuckling. Now he's engaged in a hopeless struggle within his own residence. Together with his 2 sons, he continuously fuels their cast-iron stove, tossing split oak logs into it every 20 minutes. Yet, the warmth is being drawn away more quickly than they can produce it. The pressure differential between the heated interior and the raging storm outside generates a suction phenomenon. Frigid air is being siphoned through unseen gaps in the flooring, via the keyhole, and even through the pores of the log chinking. The zone adjacent to the stove is scorching, yet only 3 feet away, a water cup on the table has formed a layer of ice. They are consuming their winter fuel stock at 3 times the anticipated pace, and the chamber remains freezing. This exemplifies the harshness of a combative mindset, attempting to dominate the environment through fire. It's a war of attrition, but the atmosphere possesses greater supplies. In the meantime, snow is accumulating, building up against the northern sides of the cabins, rising to windowsills and then to the eaves. For a typical cabin, this poses a risk because the mass exerts pressure on flat areas, causing groaning and creaking sounds. However, the wind proves to be the real danger. It instantly tears away the thermal barrier from the buildings. With each gust, the temperature inside Cyrus's dwelling falls by another degree, and anxiety starts to take hold. A profound, instinctive terror emerges from the realization that the wood supply may not endure even this week, never mind the entire winter. Trapped inside their own home, they bundle in blankets that offer no more warmth than paper, awaiting a dawn that appears as though it may never arrive. When the sun finally rises above the horizon the following morning, it provides no heat, only a dazzling, frigid glare bouncing off 5 feet of newly fallen snow. The wind has abated to a more tolerable roar, yet the air remains motionless, fatally still, and bitterly cold. Thomas, who owns the stables, battles to open his door, pushing hard against a large snowdrift. Clad in fur garments, his breath crystals forming in his beard, his immediate concern is for his horses, followed closely by Martha. A sense of guilt eats at him. He observed her excavating that pit, heard the townspeople ridicule her, and took minimal action to prevent it. He envisions the dugout now covered, collapsed, or merely transformed into a frosty tomb. He figures that any pit in the earth would be completely buried by snowfall, meaning she is probably deceased. Putting on his snowshoes and taking a shovel, he sets off on a gradual, grueling journey to the outskirts of the settlement, planning to retrieve a corpse. As Thomas goes over the little rise that gives a view of Martha's area, he halts abruptly. He anticipates seeing an unblemished white blanket in the location where the shelter once stood. What he actually sees is a dark mark against the white. The sharply angled roof covered in glass has completely thrown off all the snow. Because the roof slopes at 45 degrees and the glass is slippery, snow cannot cling to it. Instead, it slips down and accumulates on the lower southern side, leaving the glass fully open to the sun's morning rays. However, what makes his heart skip isn't that. It's an odd optical effect. Right above the glass, the air appears to ripple with the same wavy shimmer you'd see over a scorching asphalt road in summertime. The heat is actually visible, rising upward. He rushes down the incline, his footsteps making loud crunching sounds in the snow. Seeing no smoke coming from any chimney frightens him once more. Arriving at the entrance, he asks himself whether the fire has died. The door, set into the hillside and protected by the earthen mound, he prepares himself for the worst scenario. As he lifts the latch, the door feels substantial, its insulation coming from straw crammed between wooden layers. With a creaking noise it opens, and instead of a deathly odor, Thomas is met by a blast of air that is so hot and damp it's comparable to stepping into a bakery. He staggers inward, his eyes adjusting to the abrupt change. He removes the scarf from around his mouth, breathing heavily. He's not trembling with cold, he's perspiring. The very first thing he notices indoors is the quietness. The outdoor wind seems like something from the past. Down here, far underground, everything is motionless. The next thing he perceives is the illumination. Sunlight, low in the winter sky, pours through the slanted glass panel, filling the cramped area with such brightness that the black basalt rocks on the rear wall appear luminous. Martha occupies a rocking chair, busy with knitting, and lifts her gaze in astonishment. "Thomas," she says in a tranquil tone, "shut the door. You're allowing the warmth to escape." Thomas remains frozen in place. His eyes go to the thermometer attached to a wooden upright beam. The display shows 68 degrees. He turns his attention to the stove, located in the corner. It's not warm. There's no flame burning and no remnants of ash. Prior to our detailed explanation of why Thomas is covered in sweat, while the people around him are suffering from cold, take a moment to consider this question. Think back to the most recent occasion when you addressed an issue by taking something away instead of putting something extra in. Martha didn't install a larger heating device. She eliminated the wind's direct contact. This concept designed by removal is frequently disregarded because we gravitate toward increased technology, greater power, and higher consumption. Should you be appreciating this thorough exploration of overlooked survival techniques and wish to encounter further narratives on how historical knowledge can guide our future resilience, spend a moment to subscribe. Next, let's examine the scientific principles behind that stone wall feeling warm when touched. The process in action is the greenhouse effect, harnessed here as a survival tool. The process begins with the glass pane. Energy from the sun traverses the void of space in the form of shortwave radiation. These short waves pass through glass with little obstruction, going through Martha's roof and hitting the dark stone floor and black basalt back wall. When light strikes those dense, dark surfaces, it gets absorbed and turned into heat. The heat attempts to escape by bouncing back, but as it does so, it transforms into long-wave infrared radiation. The magic lies in glass being opaque to long waves, so it reflects heat like a mirror. Energy enters, changes form, and then cannot escape. It becomes trapped. However, merely trapping heat isn't enough. Storage is necessary, and that's where thermal mass becomes important. Had Martha used wood for her walls, the room would reach 100 degrees at midday and fall to freezing overnight. Wood acts as an insulator, not as a battery for storing heat. However, the heavy stone and the 100 gallons of water inside the whiskey barrels function like a thermal flywheel. They soak up extra heat throughout the day, stopping the room from getting too hot. Then when the sun goes down and outside temperatures plummet to -30, The stored heat is released. Heat flow then reverses direction. The stones, now warmer than the room air, start radiating their stored heat back into the space. The surrounding earth, at a steady 50 degrees, serves as a baseline temperature. So the stones only need to warm the space from 50 to 65 degrees, instead of from -30 to 65. Thomas moves over to the water barrels. He feels the wood, then puts a finger into the open barrel. The water is lukewarm, nearly hot. It's physics, Martha comments, seeing his confusion. Just basic physics, Thomas. In just 1 hour, the sun provides more energy than Cyrus could gather by chopping wood in a month. I simply created a mechanism to capture that energy. She rises and goes to the rear wall, placing her palm on the dark stone. Touch this. Thomas follows her instruction. The rock seems alive, emitting a soft, constant heat that seeps through his frozen gloves. This isn't the harsh, burning heat from a stove that scorches your front while your back remains cold. It's an all-around, surrounding warmth, reminiscent of a living being. By midday, the news has spread. Thomas not only made it through his visit, but also stayed for coffee, heated on a tiny alcohol burner, because the large stove wasn't necessary. When he goes back to town, he carries more than just reports. He brings refugees along. Cyrus, humbled by the bitter cold as his woodpile shrinks, sets aside his pride. He shows up at the dugout with his wife and children, their lips blue, bundled in all the blankets they possess. They anticipate a wet, dark cavern, but instead they enter a sunlit haven. In that moment, the social order of Granite Creek breaks apart and restructures. The old ranking based on physical strength and wood-chopping skill vanishes, replaced by a ranking based on knowledge. The dugout turns into a short-term refuge for the weakest members. There is little room. The air is pure, free of smoke and soot, carrying only the scent of soil and heated rock. The doubters sit on the ground, leaning against the earthen walls, and for the first time in days, they cease trembling. Cyrus circles the structure, knocking on the glass and checking the roof's angle. As a builder and a man who understands mechanics, he now grasps the logic, which is obvious and concrete. 45 degrees, he murmurs, glancing at the sun to observe its low trajectory. He then studies the stone wall, and the rock retains the heat. He gazes at Martha, not with the scorn from the week before, but with a puzzled admiration. "We've been battling the breeze," he says softly, "while you simply allowed it to pass around you. The proof is undeniable. It's measured not through debate, but in temperature readings and stacks of saved firewood. While others in the town consumed half their winter supply during 3 days of snowstorm, Martha didn't use any. What was once called the widow's folly is now the widow's fortress." People start to understand that their conventional log homes, representing progress and domination, are actually poorly suited to the surroundings. Their cabins are like wooden tents, engaged in a struggle with the Arctic. Meanwhile, Martha's dwelling merges with the terrain. She never fought nature but worked alongside it. This change in viewpoint from domination to partnership holds a lesson much more significant than mere warmth. Over the next weeks, as the snow disappears and the spring thaw makes the plains muddy, the buildings of Granite Creek start evolving. The transformation begins gradually. A small greenhouse attached to the general store's south wall shows up. After that, Thomas excavates a root cellar that connects to a habitable area. By the next fall, 3 additional families have started building not log houses, but durable, earth-bermed homes. They employ the available stone, the local ground, and the sun's consistent angles. People visit Martha for advice, not handouts. She teaches them to determine the roof pitch according to their latitude, prepare the clay mixture, and apply the window layers. In local stories, the Granite Creek Manor is a combination. It utilizes available wood for framing, yet depends on soil for thermal protection and sunlight for warmth. The settlement turns into an odd, futuristic trial set in the Old West era. A cluster of partially underground glass-walled houses that shine like lamps during winter evenings. They've discovered that real endurance depends not on wall thickness, but on intelligent design. They realized that the most sophisticated tool they possessed was not the steam engine or the gun, but the skill to watch and imitate nature. Martha spends the rest of her life in the dwelling she excavated. She does not get married again, yet she's always with company. Her residence turns into a meeting spot, a type of classroom where survival science is shared together with cooking instructions and small talk. She demonstrated that a single individual with the right methods can exceed an entire town with incorrect beliefs. When we reflect on this tale from our cozy, modern, controlled temperature homes, it seems merely an odd piece of history. However, consider this. If the electrical network failed tomorrow, if fuel stopped being delivered, how many days would your house stay warm? Martha's earth-sheltered home required no grid, no logistics. It only needed sunlight and ground. At a time when we are becoming more detached from the origins of our existence, maybe the most forward-looking action is to gaze at the soil under us. And once again, learn the teachings of the widow from Granite Creek. But a vital caution. Before you pick up a digging tool,